I'll take it off. Do it." The rancher froze before doing the unthinkable. The rancher had lived on his land for so long that the fences, the soil, and even the old windmill felt like extensions of his own body. Every morning before the sun fully rose, he woke up without an alarm. His days always started the same way. He washed his face with cold water, pulled on his worn boots, and stepped outside to breathe in the sharp, clean air of the open fields. To him, silence was not empty. It was full of meaning. It told him the weather, the mood of the land, and whether the day would be easy or hard. People in the nearby town knew him as a quiet man. He did not talk much, but when he did, his words mattered. He paid his bills on time, helped his neighbors when they were in trouble, and never asked for anything in return. He believed in hard work, respect, and keeping one's word. These were lessons his father had taught him long ago, back when the ranch was smaller and life felt simpler. The ranch itself was not large, but it was enough. There were cattle to feed, fences to repair, and endless small tasks that filled the hours. He liked it that way. Busy hands kept the mind steady. He did not enjoy crowded places or long conversations. The land never judged him and never demanded explanations. It simply responded to effort. Years earlier, he had made a choice to live this way. After losing people he loved and facing disappointments he never spoke about, he decided that solitude was safer. Out here, he controlled his world. He knew every sound at night, every shadow near the barn. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he believed. That day began like any other. The sky was clear and the sun promised warmth. He checked on the animals, repaired a loose plank on the corral, and ate a simple lunch standing near the barn door. There was a sense of peace that settled over him as the afternoon passed. It felt like one of those days that would quietly disappear into memory. But life has a way of changing direction without warning. In the late afternoon, as the shadows stretched long across the fields, he noticed something unusual near the edge of his property. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a stray or injured deer. But as he moved closer, he realized it was a person. Someone was lying on the ground, barely moving. His first reaction was confusion, followed quickly by concern. People did not usually come this far out unless they meant to. He approached carefully, calling out to make sure the person was conscious. When he got closer, he could see signs of distress. The person looked weak and exhausted, clearly in need of help. The rancher felt his chest tighten. Emergencies were not part of his daily routine. He was used to handling problems with animals or broken equipment, not situations involving strangers and human vulnerability. Still, he knelt down and checked to see if the person was breathing properly. The signs were not good, but they were not hopeless either. He knew the nearest hospital was far away. Cell service on the ranch was unreliable, and even if he managed to reach help, it would take time this person might not have. His mind started working through possibilities, weighing risks, and searching for the right decision. He helped the person to a shaded area near the barn and brought water. The person was conscious but clearly struggling. Their voice was weak, and their movements were slow. They tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out broken and incomplete. What mattered was clear enough. Waiting could make things worse. As the rancher listened, he felt something shift inside him. This was no longer just about helping out of kindness. This was about responsibility, about being the only one there when someone needed help. He had always believed in doing the right thing, but the right thing is not always comfortable. He could already sense that this situation would push him beyond his usual limits. He felt fear, not of the person, but of the choices he might have to make. He worried about doing something wrong, about being misunderstood, about crossing boundaries he had always respected. The land around them remained calm, almost indifferent. The cattle grazed quietly in the distance. The windmill creaked slowly, turning with the breeze. Nature did not pause for human dilemmas. He stood there for a moment, hands on his hips, staring out at the horizon. He wished someone else would appear, a doctor, a neighbor, anyone, but there was no one. Just him, the injured person, and the vast open space that offered no easy answers. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of who he was. He was not reckless. He was careful. He respected rules and personal limits. But he also knew that ignoring a person in need would haunt him far more than any mistake made while trying to help. He returned to the person's side, speaking calmly, asking simple questions. He listened carefully, trying to understand what kind of help was needed right now, not later. The person looked at him with tired eyes, full of trust and desperation. That look stayed with him. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop. He knew that delaying further could be dangerous. He felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was not just another day on the ranch anymore. This was a test of his character. He gathered supplies from the house, items he thought might help. His movements were steady, but his thoughts were not. Each step reminded him that once he acted, there would be no turning back. He would have to live with whatever followed. When he returned, the person spoke again, their voice barely above a whisper. They seemed aware of the difficulty of the situation. They did not demand. They did not panic. They simply acknowledged the reality they were in. The rancher felt time slow down. Every sound seemed louder. Every second felt heavier. He knew that the next decision he made would change the course of both their lives, even if only in a small way. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ranch in soft orange light, he realized that the quiet life he had built was about to be interrupted in a way he could never have planned for. This was only the beginning. The rancher stayed close as the evening settled in. The light faded slowly, turning the wide land into soft shades of gray and gold. He could feel the air growing cooler, and that worried him. The person lying near the barn was already weak. Cold would only make things worse. He spoke gently, asking if they could hear him clearly. The person nodded, though the movement was small. Their breathing was uneven, and every breath sounded like effort. The rancher had seen sick animals before, and he knew the signs of strain. Even without training, he understood that this was serious. He tried his phone again, stepping a few paces away, lifting it higher, searching for even one bar of signal. Nothing. He turned in a slow circle, frustration tightening his jaw. The land that usually gave him comfort now felt too large, too empty. He returned to the injured person and told them honestly that help was far away. He did not lie or make promises he could not keep. He believed that respect mattered, especially in moments like this. The person listened, eyes half open, and seemed to understand. They tried to sit up but failed, letting out a quiet sound of pain. The rancher immediately supported them, careful not to cause more harm. He helped them lie back down, adjusting their position so they could breathe more easily. He placed a folded jacket under their head and covered them with another to keep them warm. As he worked, memories surfaced in his mind. His father teaching him how to stay calm when an animal was hurt. His father's voice always steady, always clear. Panic doesn't help. Think first, act second. Those words guided him now. He asked more questions, slow and simple. Where did it hurt the most? How long had they been like this? Did they have any conditions he should know about? The answers came slowly, but they came. Enough to paint a rough picture of what had happened. The person had been traveling, taken a wrong turn, and underestimated the distance. By the time they realized they were in trouble, it was already too late to turn back. Exhaustion had taken over and their body had simply given up. The rancher felt a mix of sympathy and concern. He had seen people underestimate the land before. Wide open spaces looked gentle, but they could be unforgiving. He looked toward the house, calculating the distance. Carrying the person inside would not be easy, but leaving them outside was not an option. With care and effort, he managed to help them up, supporting most of their weight as they leaned heavily against him. Step by step, They moved toward the house. Every few moments he paused to let them rest. His arms strained, but he did not complain. He focused on steady movement and calm breathing. Finally, they reached the small house and he guided them inside, laying them down carefully on the couch. The house, usually quiet and empty, suddenly felt different. There was another presence now, another life depending on him. He turned on a lamp, filling the room with warm light, and fetched water, towels, and anything else he thought might help. He checked their condition again. Some signs had improved, others had not. Time still felt like the enemy. He knew he had to make decisions soon, and none of them were easy. He considered driving them to town himself, but the roads were rough, and moving them too much could cause harm. Waiting until morning also felt risky. He stood there, hands resting on the back of a chair, staring at the floor as he thought. The person opened their eyes and looked at him. There was fear there, but also trust. That trust weighed heavily on him. He had not asked for this responsibility, but it was his now. They spoke again, quietly explaining that certain immediate steps could help stabilize the situation. They did not demand. They simply explained, as someone who knew their own body and its limits. The rancher listened carefully, asking questions to be sure he understood. As the reality of what needed to be done became clearer, he felt his chest tighten. The steps were practical, necessary, and respectful, but they crossed personal lines he had never crossed before. Lines he had always believed were important to keep. He stepped away for a moment, moving to the kitchen. He leaned against the counter and closed his eyes. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window, an older man, tired lines on his face, uncertainty in his eyes. He thought about walking away, about waiting, about hoping things would somehow improve on their own, but deep down he knew that would not happen. Avoiding action would be a choice too, and not a good one. He thought about how he would feel later, remembering this night. Would he be able to live with himself if he did nothing? The answer came quickly and clearly. No. He returned to the living room, pulling up a chair so he could sit near the couch. He explained what he could and could not do, setting clear boundaries even in the middle of urgency. He spoke calmly, not as someone in charge, but as someone trying to help. The person listened and then spoke the words that stayed with him, spoken with effort but clarity. They accepted the situation for what it was and placed their trust in him. There was no drama in their voice, only honesty. The rancher felt the full weight of the moment settle over him. This was not about fear anymore. It was about responsibility, respect, and the courage to act when action was needed most. He prepared carefully, moving slowly, checking each step in his mind before doing anything. His hands were steady, though his heart beat hard in his chest. He focused on the task, not the discomfort of the situation. Outside, night fully arrived. The wind moved gently across the fields, and the world continued on as if nothing unusual was happening. Inside the small house, however, everything had changed. As he worked, he kept his voice calm, explaining what he was doing and why. The person responded when they could, offering reassurance in small ways. The trust between them grew, not from words, but from shared effort and understanding. Time passed differently then. Minutes felt longer, heavier. Every small improvement brought a brief sense of relief, followed quickly by fresh concern. He stayed alert, watching closely, ready to adjust if needed. Finally, there was a moment, a quiet shift, that told him the immediate danger had eased. The person's breathing steadied. Their color improved slightly. It was not over, but it was better. The rancher sat back, exhaustion washing over him. His body ached and his mind felt stretched thin. But beneath all of that was a steady feeling of relief. He had acted. He had not turned away. He knew the night was far from finished. There would still be long hours ahead, decisions yet to come, and consequences he could not predict. But for now, he allowed himself one deep breath. Outside, the ranch slept under the stars, unaware of the quiet struggle that had taken place within its walls. And the rancher, sitting in the dim light, understood that his quiet life had changed, not because he wanted it to, but because he had chosen to do what was right when it mattered most. The night grew deeper and silence filled the house again, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was heavy, watchful, and full of waiting. The rancher sat near the couch, not sleeping, not resting, just staying alert. His eyes moved often, checking the person's face, listening to every breath, noticing every small change. He had placed a chair close so he would not need to stand too often. His body was tired, but his mind refused to slow down. Every few minutes he reminded himself to stay calm. Panic would only make mistakes more likely. He focused on what he could control, keeping the room warm, offering water in small amounts, and speaking softly when needed. The person opened their eyes now and then. Sometimes they spoke a few words. Sometimes they only looked at him as if making sure he was still there. Each time their eyes met, the rancher nodded gently, letting them know they were not alone. He did not use many words. He believed presence mattered more than talking. As the hours passed, doubt began to creep into his thoughts. He replayed every decision he had made since finding the person on his land. He wondered if he should have tried harder to reach help, if there was something he had missed, something he should be doing now. These thoughts came quietly but stayed longer each time. At one point he stood and walked to the window. Outside, the moonlight spread across the fields, making everything look calm and untouched. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful place could hold so much tension inside one small house. He rested his forehead against the glass and let out a slow breath. He thought about the life he had chosen. Years of quiet routines, limited connections, and controlled distance from others. It had felt safe, predictable, but now that safety felt thin. Life had reached into his world without asking permission and placed another human being in his care. He returned to the couch and checked again. The person's condition had not worsened, but it had not fully improved either. It was a fragile balance. He knew that the next few hours were critical. The person spoke again, their voice still weak but more focused. They thanked him. Not loudly, not with emotion, just a simple thank you spoken as if it mattered deeply. The rancher nodded and said they didn't need to thank him. In his mind, this was not kindness. It was duty. Still, the words affected him. He was not used to gratitude like this. Out here, work spoke for itself. Animals didn't thank you. Land didn't praise you. Hearing those words made him feel exposed in a way he couldn't explain. The person then asked him a question that surprised him. They asked why he lived so far away from everyone. The rancher hesitated. He had not planned to talk about himself. He usually avoided such questions. But the night was long and honesty felt easier in the dim light. He answered simply. He said life had once been crowded and loud, and he had lost people he cared about. After that, quiet felt safer. Out here, he knew what to expect. The land did not leave or disappoint. The person listened without interrupting. When he finished, they nodded slowly as if they understood more than he had said. There was a pause, then they spoke again, saying that even quiet lives sometimes get interrupted for a reason. Those words stayed with him. As the night continued, the rancher felt the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. His hands trembled slightly when he poured water. He noticed it and forced himself to slow down. He could not afford to rush now. At one point, the person's breathing changed, becoming shallow again. The rancher felt his heart tighten. He leaned closer, watching carefully, listening, adjusting their position as gently as he could. He spoke calmly, even though fear rose in his chest. This was the hardest part, not knowing if what he was doing was enough, not knowing if help would arrive in time, not knowing if the morning would bring relief or regret. He thought about calling neighbors, but the closest ones lived miles away. Driving in the dark over rough land could make things worse. Every option carried risk. There was no perfect choice, only the best one he could make with what he had. He stayed awake, counting breaths, watching the clock, measuring time in small movements and quiet moments. Every hour felt longer than the last. His thoughts wandered to memories he had kept buried, times when he had frozen before acting, times when hesitation had cost him something important. He remembered one moment from long ago when he had waited too long to speak, too long to act, and lost someone he loved because of it. That memory burned quietly inside him now, pushing him forward, reminding him why he could not freeze this time. The person stirred again and whispered a few words he barely caught. He leaned in closer. They were asking him to stay close, not to leave the room. The rancher sat back down immediately, closer than before. He realized then that this night was not only about survival. It was about trust, about two strangers connected by circumstance, sharing a moment neither would forget. As dawn slowly approached, a faint light began to appear at the edge of the sky. The rancher noticed it through the window and felt a small sense of relief. Morning meant new options, more visibility, more hope. The person's condition stabilized again, not fully better but steady enough to breathe more easily. The rancher allowed himself to relax just a little. He stretched his stiff legs and rolled his shoulders, feeling the ache of long hours without rest. When the sun finally rose, casting pale light into the room, he felt something close to gratitude. They had made it through the night. That alone felt like a victory. But as the new day began, he knew the hardest part was not over. Decisions still lay ahead. Outside help would still be needed. Questions would be asked. Lines would be examined. And deep inside, the rancher understood something important had already changed. He had faced hesitation, fear, and uncertainty, and chosen to act anyway. The quiet life he had built was no longer untouched. It now carried the weight of one long night, a fragile trust, and a choice that would stay with him long after this moment passed. Morning light filled the house slowly, touching the walls, the floor, and the quiet space where the rancher sat. He had not slept. His eyes felt heavy and his body was stiff, but his focus stayed sharp. Every few minutes, he checked the person resting on the couch, watching their breathing, their color, the small movements that showed they were still holding on. The new day brought a mix of hope and worry. Daylight made things clearer, but it also made the situation feel more real. Night had hidden some of the fear. Morning showed it fully. The person opened their eyes and seemed more aware now. They looked around, taking in the room, the simple furniture, the clean floor, and the rancher sitting nearby. Their voice was still weak but stronger than before. They asked what time it was. When he told them it was morning, a quiet relief passed over their face. The rancher offered water again, careful not to rush. He spoke gently, explaining that the night had been difficult but they were stable for now. He did not make big promises. He had learned long ago that honesty mattered more than comfort. They nodded slowly. There was a pause, then they said something that made his chest tighten. They said they remembered everything. They remembered the pain, the fear, and the moment when they asked him to help in a way that was hard for both of them. The rancher swallowed and nodded. He did not look away. He told them he had only done what was needed, nothing more, nothing careless. He spoke plainly as he always did, but inside his thoughts were not calm. The memory of that moment returned sharply. The hesitation. The fear of crossing a line he had always respected. The way his hands had felt heavy at first, then steady as he focused on doing the right thing. That moment had changed him. He stood and walked to the kitchen, needing movement, needing space. He made simple food, though he barely touched it. His appetite was gone. Instead, he kept listening, alert to every sound from the other room. When he returned, he told the person that once they were strong enough, he would try again to reach help. Daylight might bring better signal. If not, he would drive carefully toward town. He explained his plan clearly, step by step, so there would be no surprises. The person listened and agreed. They trusted his judgment now. That trust felt heavier than fear. He tried his phone again, stepping outside, climbing a small rise near the house. This time, a weak signal appeared. It was not strong, but it was enough. He made the call quickly, speaking clearly, giving directions, explaining the condition as best he could. When the call ended, he stood still for a moment, staring out over the land. Relief washed over him, slow and deep. Help was finally on the way. Inside the house, he shared the news. The person closed their eyes and let out a long breath. Their shoulders relaxed slightly, as if their body had been waiting to hear those words. The hours that followed felt different. The sharp edge of danger softened, but tension remained. The rancher stayed close, continuing to help in small ways, adjusting pillows, offering water, speaking calmly when the person seemed anxious. They talked more now, not about the emergency but about ordinary things, where the person came from, why they had been traveling. Simple stories that made the time pass more easily. The rancher shared a little too. He talked about the ranch, about mornings with no noise but the wind, about how the land had taught him patience. He did not talk about loss, but it was there, quietly shaping his words. At one point, the person looked at him closely and said that not everyone would have done what he did. The rancher shrugged. Praise made him uncomfortable. He said anyone should help if they can. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Many people would have frozen. Many would have waited. He almost had. That thought stayed with him. When the sound of a vehicle finally reached the house, the rancher felt his shoulders drop for the first time since the night before. He stepped outside and saw help arriving, dust rising behind the tires. He explained everything carefully, clearly, without drama. He answered questions honestly. He stayed nearby as they took over, watching closely, ready to step in if needed. Before they left, the person reached for his hand. Their grip was weak but firm enough to be felt. They looked at him with eyes full of emotion and said thank you again. This time, the words carried weight that could not be ignored. The rancher nodded, his throat tight. He watched as they were taken away, the vehicle disappearing down the long dirt road. When the dust settled, the ranch felt empty again, too empty. He stood there for a long time, listening to the familiar sounds, the wind, the distant cattle, the creak of the fence. Everything looked the same, but he knew it was not. Inside the house, the quiet returned, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt reflective, heavy with memory. He sat down slowly, feeling the full exhaustion hit him at last. His hands shook slightly as the tension released. He leaned back and closed his eyes, replaying the last 24 hours in his mind. He realized that the unthinkable was not the act itself. It was the courage to step forward when fear told him to step back. It was choosing responsibility over comfort. As the day moved on, he knew this moment would stay with him, not as regret, not as pride, but as a reminder that even the quietest lives can be tested. And when they are, what matters most is not what feels easy, but what is right. The house felt unusually quiet after everything was over. The rancher stood alone in the doorway for a long time, watching the empty road where the vehicle had disappeared. The dust had settled, and the land looked the same as it always did, calm and wide, stretching out under the bright sky. Yet inside him, nothing felt the same. He closed the door slowly and leaned against it. His legs felt weak now that the pressure was gone. For hours he had stayed strong because he had to. Now that the emergency had passed, his body finally allowed itself to feel tired. Very tired. He walked into the living room and looked at the couch where the person had rested. The pillows were slightly out of place. A folded blanket lay where he had left it. Small signs of a night that had changed more than just the arrangement of furniture. He cleaned the space quietly, moving with care, as if the memory itself might break if he rushed. He placed everything back where it belonged. Still, the room felt different. It held something invisible now, an experience that could not be removed or forgotten. Later, he stepped outside and began his usual chores. The animals still needed feeding. The fences still needed checking. The land did not pause for human moments. At first his movements felt slow and heavy, but as he worked, the familiar routine began to steady him. He noticed small things he usually took for granted: the sound of boots on dry earth, the way the animals responded to his voice, the rhythm of work he had followed for years. It felt grounding, like returning to something solid after standing on shaky ground. As the day passed, his thoughts kept drifting back to the night before, not to the fear, but to the choice. The moment when he could have stepped back but didn't. That realization stayed with him. He had always thought of courage as something loud and bold, something people noticed, but what he had experienced was quiet, private. It did not come with applause or praise. It came with doubt, shaking hands, and the decision to stay present when it would have been easier to walk away. In the afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. News travels fast in small places. The neighbor asked if everything was all right. The rancher nodded and said yes. He kept his answer simple. He did not feel the need to explain. That night, when the sun sank low and the sky turned soft and orange, the rancher sat on the porch. The same place he had sat many evenings before, but tonight he did not feel as alone as he once had. He thought about how easily lives cross paths, how a single moment can connect two people who might otherwise never meet. He wondered where the person was now, if they were safe, if they were healing. He hoped so. Days passed. Life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Mornings came early. Work filled the hours. Nights grew quiet again, but something inside him had shifted. He noticed it in small ways. He was more patient, more aware. He found himself listening more closely when people spoke. He waved to neighbors instead of just nodding. He did not seek company, but he no longer avoided it either. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was short and simple. The handwriting was careful. The words were honest. The person wrote that they were recovering well. That help had arrived in time. That they would never forget what he had done. They did not use big words or dramatic phrases. They simply said thank you again. The rancher read the letter twice. Then he folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. He did not display it. He did not talk about it. But he knew it would stay with him for the rest of his life. That evening, he stood near the fence and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The land glowed softly in the fading light. He felt a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. He realized that the night had given him something unexpected. Not trouble, not regret, but clarity. He had spent years building a life around safety and distance, believing that staying alone would protect him from pain. But when the moment came, it was connection, not distance, that gave him strength. He understood now that being responsible did not mean being cold, that helping someone did not weaken him. It strengthened him. The unthinkable act was not what others might imagine. It was allowing himself to care again, to step into uncertainty, to accept that doing the right thing sometimes means feeling uncomfortable. As the stars appeared one by one, the rancher felt grateful, not for the difficulty, but for the lesson. He did not wish to repeat the experience, but he did not wish it away either. Life would go on, quiet, steady, familiar. But now, beneath that quiet, there was a deeper understanding. If the moment ever came again, he knew he would not freeze, he would act.